On its surface, IT and creativity may feel like polar opposites, but in the middle, you'll find IT service management.
An incident happens, and it's just like everybody running around with their, like chickens with their heads cut off, right? But if you have a process around how to react to those situations, things go much smoother.
For Senior Director of IT Infrastructure, Ted Korba, ITSM
It is sort of like the playbook of managing your IT services, a method to the madness.
And for change management, the key to success.
But when you follow ITSM processes and you're successfully implementing changes, then you start building this confidence with your customers and your user base where they trust you.
On Outside In, we're talking about IT service management, the tools and processes needed to strengthen any operation. Ted, welcome to the Outside In podcast, where we talk about how creativity and customer service influence outsourcing. Today, we're taking a deeper dive into how you bring the concepts of ISTs, IT management services, to help create a better customer experience. So to get started, can you tell us what IT service management is and why it's so critical to modern technology?
Sure. IT service management is sort of like the playbook of managing your IT services. It includes things like problem management, change management, incident management, and it's very, very important for a number of reasons, especially in today's technology-heavy atmosphere. Things like saving time and money for the company, being more efficient, keeping services performing well, faster speeds, faster storage, faster infrastructure, for security, keeping things compliant.
Yeah, so I love what you're talking about. And I love where you talked about that playbook. And I know a large part of your personal life has been hockey and has been coaching hockey. So how has those experiences and creating those playbooks helped you create an IT playbook?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, let's see. I mean, I think hockey can be a chaotic sport, and so can the corporate world. And if you're not careful, if you don't have these ITSM processes in place, it can be very chaotic, you know, and ITSM brings some, what's the word? I don't know, I just dropped a blank.
I was thinking you were going to say like stability,
No, there's an idiom, a method to the madness.
Got it. Perfect. Yes.
Yes. So ITSM brings a method to the madness and that chaos. So I mean, I use it every day in hockey and in the corporate world.
Perfect. No, that's great. So what, in your opinion, makes you and in general an effective leader in this world?
I think I'm very process driven. I like to adapt. I like to take things that I've learned in my personal experience past my career and build on what I've learned. I've been lucky to have some really good mentors, and I try and listen to my staff and constantly adapt. An example would be past my career, I've seen a lot of change management companies that I've worked for that involve, maybe just checking a box, right? Obviously in technology, it's constantly evolving, constantly changing, and if you don't handle those changes well, it can cause outages, right? But also for compliance, a lot of companies will just, have a change management policy, but not actually follow it, or it may not be effective. It's that could look like maybe filling out a piece of paper with a change, and then having a whole group of people sit in a meeting that nobody really wants to be in or listen to, kind of just a waste of time to check a box. Whereas I have seen those problems in the past, and I try and change that. So for example, we do our change control using a tool called Jira Service Management. When the goal here is to not hinder change, not slow things down, but just to mitigate risk and protect ourselves from these changes. And we do our meetings in chat-based format using Microsoft Teams or Slack, instead of forcing a bunch of people in a room face-to-face. And it's a lot more conducive to everyday work. You know, you can, it's very easy to sit at your desk or at home on a chat-based meeting and approve a change, you know. Things like that, small innovations that make things more efficient.
So one of my side gigs at IST is that I handle our real estate. So obviously part of that was developing an office where I expected people to come into that office. So
Yes.
I'm just curious if you can talk a little bit about, you mentioned chat, Jira, Teams, Slack, how you can implement those types of solutions yet still create an environment where in-person has value also.
So I've sort of honed a communication policy and guidelines within our IT department that I've used, or that I've actually changed over the years, but chat-based communication systems like Slack or Teams are at the heart of everything that I do. In today's age, it's not practical to have everyone in an office or in one geographical location, right? And you may have a lot of people at one location, but then you have others that may be remote and may miss out on collaboration opportunities, right? So whereas in the past, I think companies have relied heavily on things like email or face-to-face conversation, there's certain things that you can do to enable those remote employees to stay in the loop and in the conversation. So, I mean, some simple ones would be always sharing your webcam in a meeting. You know, sometimes you jump on a vendor call or something and people aren't sharing their cameras. That's like a big no-no for me, you know, because you get a lot out of it. Also, things like having our meetings and our chat-based communications in public channels. So I think by nature, people like to do things behind closed doors. And the equivalent of that would be, so back in the, just a little bit back in the day, people used, what was it, Microsoft, what was it before Teams?
Messenger is just,
Well, Messenger,
wasn't it
Link,
just, yeah.
you know, chat-based communications instead of when Slack and Teams came about, you had channel-based communications, right? So you could have, I basically empower my team to have all conversations in public channels. I think by nature they want to do things in a private chat, but you know that loses the opportunity for collaboration. So typically my rule is unless it's private or personal conversation, it should be in a public channel. And you'd be surprised how many times a new trainee or somebody can jump in a conversation or learn a little tidbit out of that conversation. You know what I mean?
No, I do, and what I like what you're talking about, it kind of plays into the stereotype that is around IT people, and you know they're that
Introverted,
they're that techie in the basement, they don't communicate with other people, and you're creating a change that is pushing them outside of their comfort zone to allow you to be able to solve situations faster.
I think getting out of your comfort zone is probably one of the most important things you can teach your team, you know, because if you're not out of your comfort zone, then you're probably not growing as much as you could be. I do the same thing in hockey, you know, while coaching my kids.
Right.
You know, getting out of their comfort zone is imperative to growth in general. But yes, I mean, that brings up a good point too. It's like, I think there's a lot of companies that I've gone into, a lot of customers of mine in the past. You get there and you have that quintessential IT person. Like there was that SNL skit, where it's like, actually, you know what I mean, kind of rude, condescending,
Right.
patronizing, and I think a lot of IT professionals forget, that this is a customer-centric, service-oriented industry, and you have to act as such, and actually enjoy helping people.
Well, one of the things I tell my marketing team all the time is our job is customer service. We just happen to have a product that is marketing.
Right.
And so creating that type of an environment in your IT world is going to allow y'all to be able to support the individuals at a higher level for sure.
I think we're lucky. I see it as a privilege to be able to help people on a day-to-day basis, and that's something that we promote within our IT department here at ISD.
Excellent. I'd like to dive a little bit more into change management though. So you were talking about change management, and my question is, why is there a change? And then when that why happens, what is your role in making it happen?
So I think on a regular basis, changes happen in technology constantly. Every day, all day, people are making changes. And if you don't have a process around how to control those changes, then you have a lot of risk. So I spoke earlier about faster service, more reliability when it comes to your IT infrastructure. But if you have a whole IT department making changes all willy-nilly, you're gonna have problems, right? A lot of the time, not only will you have those problems, but when those incidents arise from those problems, and if you're not tracking your changes, it's gonna be really hard to solve those problems, right? Because you don't know what changes you made. You're not tracking them, you don't have a change log. So it's very important to track those changes. It's sort of like, have you ever seen Kitchen Nightmares?
Yeah.
With Gordon Ramsay?
Absolutely.
Well, you know that Gordon Ramsay is gonna go into all these restaurants, and he always he walks into the cooler and he sees raw chicken next to cooked chicken.
Yep.
It's a big no-no, it's cross-contamination. Well, it's the same thing in IT. It's to me, it should be common sense, but it's not, to a lot of IT departments. And it's very, very important, because if you don't have change management, then you're not gonna have the uptime and the service reliability that you need as a corporate entity.
So you talked about risk, and so risk is an interesting thing in business, because you got to have a level of ability to have failure to be able to look outside the box and put creative processes in place and see what's working and not working. But in IT, failure is unlike failure in marketing, where our LinkedIn ad didn't get the views we wanted, let's try something different. For you, it can be a severe outage or whatever. So how do you find that balance in allowing your team to fail, allowing them to take risks, but to not push beyond that bounds that puts the corporation in trouble?
And that's a good question. To answer it, we can kind of think about the process of change management itself. So like I said earlier, it's not there. A lot of the time when you implement change management in an IT department to a group of employees that aren't used to it, you always get the same answers. Oh, this is slowing me down, or oh, this is, this is silly, or, I have to write a change for every change I make. Like, this is gonna take forever. But when it comes down to it, what it's really doing is making people think before they make a change. There's also a level of peer review involved. Having another set of eyes look at a change before you make it goes a long way. And just having that alone mitigates a significant amount of risk whenever you make a change. But there's also different change types involved. If the goal is not to slow people down, we have a few different change types. So we have an emergency change, and that would be if there's a if there's an incident, there's an outage, a partial outage, whatever, I don't want my team to have to not fix the problem, have to jump through hoops in order to fix the problem first. In those situations, you just fix the problem and worry about the change later. So that would be an emergency change. If I fix a problem, and then afterwards I submit an emergency change to where it's logged, and then we review that on a weekly basis, actually twice a week. And then you have an urgent change, where an urgent change is, there's a problem, we know how to fix it, we want to fix it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be done right this second. So an urgent change would actually require approval from a change manager. And that's meant to not slow people down as well, right? That way you don't have to wait until a CAB meeting, change advisory board meeting that we have twice a week. Another change type would be a standard change. These are changes that we do often, right? Low risk, we've done it a gazillion times, we know how to do it, we know how to test for it, we know how to validate the change. You don't have to wait for approval for that, you can just submit the standard change and do it. And then that brings us to a normal change. A normal change is a change that basically goes to the change advisory board meetings. So we actually discuss these changes in detail via chat-based format, like I mentioned earlier. But those are the ones that get vetted. They're a little bit more risk, medium to high risk, and even just discussing them, having approval on them, and peer review in general. It doesn't slow us down, but it also protects the company.
So I'm gonna assume that many, if not the majority of the changes you make happen in the background, and fellow IST people don't even know that they're happening, that they just happen and those people don't know. But when you're making that change that now has a major impact on the sales division or the marketing division, the accounting division, how are you bringing those people into that peer review so that they understand what's going on and y'all can collaborate together?
Right. So I think you're right. A lot of our change is happening behind the scenes. But that's a good point on what happens during our CAB meetings. So let's say there is a change that involves communication to a whole department, let's say the marketing team.
Right.
That's a change approver is trained to think of those types of things. I mean, a lot of the time you have an engineer who, is just wants to get their stuff done, but a change manager's job is to vet a communication plan. So on each RFC or request for change that they submit, there's a field for communications plan. And in order to even go to CAB in the first place, they have to have that communications plan set in stone before it gets submitted. And that would be like, who do we contact? Who needs to be in the know for this? Who needs additional approval? Those types of things. So it's actually a part of every single change that we submit, and it gets vetted.
Excellent. Obviously, one of the changes y'all made this year at IST was implementing Jira. How does implementing an internal software like that affect our clients and make their life easier, even though they're never seeing it?
So I think it does a number of things. We provide better customer service because of those tracking abilities, right? We're more efficient, we're faster, we're more thorough in the way we solve problems. But also what Jira Service Management and Jira Software does specifically for us is we've adopted agile methodologies, which basically, I think in the old world, if you will, a lot of companies would use like a waterfall type project management methodology where you kind of come up with requirements and a plan up front and then implement according in like a waterfall fashion. But the problem I would have with that is that a lot of the time those projects can last a long time, and technology changes so fast that, the requirements could have changed by the time you're still in the midst of that project. So with agile methodologies, we're using small iterative changes, which allows us to be more flexible for our customers.
It almost sounds like you're tricking people into the fact that change is happening, because human by nature don't like change, and technology changing fast, and there's these huge seismic changes that people get put up, oh, I don't want to do. So by doing this agile and the smaller, making these small changes, building up to that, they're not realizing that where they are today is nowhere near where they're going to be in 6 months.
I mean, I think it's more that a company that lacks in ITSM processes and policies, they have a lot more problems with their changes. So it's like your user base gets this like post-traumatic stress syndrome when it comes to changes. It's like, oh, IT's making another change, good luck to us for the next 2 weeks. It's gonna be a nightmare. But when you follow ITSM processes and you're successfully implementing changes, then you start building this confidence with your customers and your user base where they trust you. They trust that they're going to be informed for anything that pertains to them. They're going to know any pitfalls when it comes to that new change, and they need to understand that these changes are usually to benefit the company and them and our customers. And then you'd be surprised how quickly things turn around, with the confidence level of your IT team.
Absolutely. So I know in my day-to-day life, it's like the fire hose is on full blast. And for me, it's often difficult to see what I need to be changing towards. And obviously in IT, you talked about it is constant and it is going crazy. So how do you stay on top of what's changing and what needs to happen and then what's the next big thing?
How do I stay on top of it? I don't know, man. I do a lot of reading.
That's a fair thing. I think it's a struggle that everyone has in today's world. There's so much information out there, and how do you pick where to process it? And
I'm a big nerd.
Yeah,
that helps. I enjoy my work. I enjoy technology. I think I enjoy making a difference, to my users. So I read a lot. I listen a lot. I try and listen to feedback from my users and that type of thing.
So Ted, we talked a lot today, and we just talked about how you keep up with different information and what's new in the world. But the other thing that's part of your job is communicating out to the world what's going on, particularly when an incident happens, when there's an outage. And one of the biggest complaints people have about IT is they don't communicate when there's a problem. So how do you proactively communicate with those people so that they're aware, but you're not spending so much time communicating to them that you're also not fixing the problem?
Yeah, once again, it's policy and process. So I think in a lot of IT departments out there, an incident happens, and it's just like everybody running around with their like chickens with their heads cut off, right? But if you have a process around how to react to those situations, things go much smoother. So for instance, when it comes to incident management, things happen, incidents happen. And it's how you communicate during those incidents and react to those incidents that make the big difference. So for instance, one thing we implemented here at IST is a war room. So we have a war room chat in Microsoft Teams, and our IT support and infrastructure teams are trained to identify if there's a major incident, and they don't hesitate. They just say something in that war room, and it's like everyone knows to just swarm it, right? So the first step is actually identifying an incident. So we swarm it together, and then we implement tools like Atlassian status page. I'll give you an example. So I think in the old world, or the old school thinking of IT, let's walk through one incident. So problem happens, you start getting emails from 20 different people, right? Your IT support people, may start working the issue. They first start thinking about who they need to contact. So let's say they identify the issue, they've confirmed that it is in fact an issue, and then they waste all this time trying to think of who do I email? Does this person need to know? Does this person need to know? But what a tool like Statuspage does is it gives one standardized place for incident communications. So everybody subscribes to either text or SMS alerts, including your customers, and you have all your components in Statuspage. So, software that you're hosting, it could be a corporate network, it could be your internet circuits. And instead of spending and wasting so much time trying to figure out who to contact, your incident responders are trained to just go directly there so that they can quickly communicate to your user base, but spend more time actually fixing the problem. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. I love that, and I want to dive a little bit more into this war room because I find it really interesting in the sense that most people would not consider creativity and the creative process as part of IT. It's very regimented. You go down the line, restart your computer, turn on, unplug, do all. It seems like that, but obviously something that's hitting that war room is something that is often outside of that process, and you have to have people that are able to creatively think on how to solve that. So how does that process work when you are in that war room, and how do you promote that type of thought where people aren't afraid to throw anything at the wall?
Well, that's two really good questions. I think first off, that was born out of me. So I'm somewhat of a perfectionist, and I don't like chaos, right? So in my early days of an engineer, these were things that I couldn't stand. I couldn't stand everybody, running around, not collaborating, and I could just see these problems and these incidents lasting, longer than they needed to be. So the war room chat was born out of that. When I became a manager myself, I said I can do these things better, and I started, trying new things, thinking outside the box, being innovative, listening to my team, actually brainstorming ways that we can improve these processes. What was the other half of because the other half of your question was really good.
So the first part was,
what does a war room look like?
Well, yeah, what does the war room look like, and how this is a time where you need individuals that are used to going down a process to be creative, to think outside the box, to not be afraid to throw anything at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
So how do you promote that? How do you promote in a world where you're trying to get rid of chaos, a little bit of chaos in there? Because that's ultimately what creativity is a little bit of chaos.
I think by nature, people are afraid to post, typically because they, think that they're asking a stupid question or they should know something that they don't. And honestly, the way I promote it is I ask a lot of stupid questions myself, because if the director of the department leads by example and is not afraid to ask these questions and bring these things up in a war room, then I think that rubs off on some of your staff. But what a war room chat looks like, let's say there's an incident or let's say somebody has trouble with email. We get a couple tickets in where somebody says their email is slow. Well, if that IT support technician feels empowered and isn't afraid to post in war room, they post in there and they say, hey, everybody, I think we might have an email issue, right? And then we all swarm it. So we typically will jump in the chat and say, I'm here, I'm looking at this. Let me confirm on my end. So then I'll look and see if I have slowness in email, along with a lot of other people, whoever's, working at the time will do the same. A lot of time we'll jump on a face-to-face meeting quickly. we assign somebody that is an incident manager. And usually that will be a manager, but it's somebody that's trained on how to properly communicate using status page. Somebody that's trained to validate that there even is a problem, which sometimes there's not. You know, the last thing you want to do is blast out to the entire company there's an email problem when there's not. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But the biggest job of an incident manager is to allow the smart people, the engineers, or the administrators or the techs to actually fix the problem. You know, because again, you mentioned earlier, a lot of IT people are introverted. I don't want these people worrying about who and what to say to people. I want them fixing the problem, you know? And the incident manager is gonna go in and ask questions to those teams to get the information needed to properly communicate with the user base.
Well, I took two really important things out of that answer. One, in a room full of marketing people, you just called us dumb and y'all are the smart ones, but
Did
you
I?
know.
No.
No, just kidding. But more importantly, we opened the podcast with it's about creativity and customer service. And I just love this war room because it is where y'all are doing both of them in ways that people don't normally see, because you're finding different ways to solve problems and you're proactively finding out how to communicate those problems in ways people can understand. And at the end of the day, that's what customer service is. It's communication. It's letting people know what's going on. And in a world of IT where there's a lot of bad stereotypes like we talked about, that war room right there shows how you've created a creative customer service focused organization and an IT department that's going to be able to better serve IST's internal clients and its external clients.
I think transparency is very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you know I got into IT from marketing?
No.
Did I ever tell you that story?
No.
So I was working at a medical company when I first got into the business, and I was always good. I was self-taught graphic designer. I used to like to use Photoshop and Illustrator and Dreamweaver. I made my several websites already. So the medical company that I worked at just thought that graphic design meant that I was good at IT, and that
It does not.
So yeah, right. And people would just come to me asking IT questions, and it just so happened that I was pretty good at computers too. So that's how my IT career began, was out of graphic design.
That many a person asks me to help on a computer. I'm like, Illustrator does not equal I
Right.
understand Outlook. So,
Yeah, well, tell that to a physician. You know.
And I love that where you talked about how you got into that, and I think it brings us kind of full circle into that last question. If you had any advice for somebody that's trying to implement ITSM systems and change management at their organization, what is it?
I would say don't be afraid to think out of the box. Do your research, and really take that step. It's tough sometimes, because again, people are indifferent to change. But if you stick to your guns and do your research and are not afraid to, think out of the box, you can't go wrong.
Thank you, Ted. This has been a fabulous conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you to our production team, Lance Gardner, Amy Godwin, Lacey Pepe, Jose Ruiz Velasco, and Eric Willis. To learn more about ISC Management Solutions and how they can benefit your business, check out iscmanagement.com and follow us on LinkedIn. To hear more Outside In, subscribe on your preferred listening platform.